know it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
This is the apocalypse you've all been waiting for. Welcome to Late Night Brains, where you can relax, be yourself, and let your brains hang out. I'm Athena.
And I'm Dave, and we're your hosts tonight for the only late night show that delivers the freshest brains for your late night consumption.
Speaking of fresh brains, we've got the freshest freestyle rapper with us tonight, Baba Brinkman. Baba, welcome to the show. It is great to have you here.
Thank you. It's really great to be back. I'm loving this infusion of amazing information I'm getting every day, and this chance to share ideas at the end. It's so fun.
Yeah, so Baba, what have you been doing all day while we have been talking about the zombie apocalypse, both above ground and under the sea and everywhere else?
Well, I have been pretty much just sitting here in my basement, watching every single talk and taking mad notes, like I'm about to have to be tested at the end of the day on it, and I kind of am. So I wonder if I actually pay more attention and retain more information than anyone else at the conference, because I'm really treating it like a crash course, and writing a rap. That's my daily thing, is I take notes most of the day, and then for the last sort of 3 hours I pivot to trying to find all the punchlines and rhyme patterns to create an original song out of the day's notes.
What was the most challenging thing about today's content, rap-wise?
It's just finding the thematic links between the various sections, and you have things that are about privilege and disadvantage in society, and then you pivot that to the natural world, and then the whole morning session had a whole human nature theme through it, and how much our sort of propensities to chase our impulses sort of curable by culture versus part of our evolved architecture. There were themes that ran through the whole day. Funny thing is like I barely notice them until I get into rhyme writing mode. And then I'm like, wait, what was that thing that person said? And I'm scrolling through the notes and like, put that rhyme there, put that rhyme there. And, it's what I call terror-based creativity because I have the deadline coming up where I know I have to perform, and something about the adrenaline gets the connections popping in my brain.
Well, it's kind of what we've got going on with the zombie apocalypse and the meeting that we're having, right? I mean, when the apocalypse is going on all around you, you can't just kind of sit back and do what you've always been doing. You have to be ready to mix it up, so to speak.
Yeah. And as we've been talking about today, it seems like the apocalypse is going on all around us.
Well, Baba, what do you think? I mean, you've been listening today to all the talks yesterday. What do you think? Do you think there's actually a zombie apocalypse happening now?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that it's happening, and some people feel comfortable thinking of it in metaphorical terms, but the real world will catch up with them eventually. So those who take it literally are going to be the best prepared.
All right. Well, Dave, you got something that you want to...
I was just going to say, well, is it time for the wrap up?
That's what I was going to say. I think I want to really just hear how Baba has wrapped his brains around all of this. And the audience also, I think, wants to see how you've done this. Baba, would you give us your wrap up of the day?
Okay, here we go. So that this will only make sense to people that experience the day that we experienced. But of course, people can always go back and watch the video to figure out what the heck I'm talking about. All right, so here we go. I'm going to use the Ballad of a Zombie instrumental for my wrap up of day 2. Here we go. Oh yeah, and one other thing. If you pay close attention, you'll note that every single speaker from the entire day's lineup is represented somewhere in the lyrical flows. All right, here we go. Eerie. Yeah. It's day 2, and I'm feeling the dread. Zombie apocalyptic images in my head, bringing the undead, the life of the party, pandemic privilege, flatten the hierarchy, images of virtual reality sex, attack of the zombie fembots up in my bed, instant gratification brought on by big tech. If you can't beat him, then hell, just join him instead. Did I say fembot? Nah, send in the M-bot. Emily Witt announcing monogamy send-off, that feeling of needing a partner to take care of it. Romantic love, that's the zombie narrative. And then she said, evolutionary psychology's bad, trying to live in harmony with our natural habitat. Only tech bros could ever believe that. Girl, don't you know what freaking conference you're at? Athena was diplomatic about all of it. She was like, now let me introduce a whole panel of Evo psychologists. And Diana 5 was like, I don't need to rebuke her from my vantage here. 70 years in the future, departing this lifeless earth, this round ball, denying human nature was the cause of our downfall. That's the reason me and all these embryos left Earth. Technological satisfaction of our immediate pleasure, stimulants that we can all enjoy in virtual reality with you and Lavoie, like having sex with a dead partner that you just murdered, enhanced with beauty tips from Francisca Minerva. It's not just a culturally induced habitat, a habit that makes women drool when they see a picture of Brad Pitt. Too much privilege and it's not a good system. Check in the mirror. Do you benefit from lookism? Lookism, baby. It's a global emergency. Either change expectations or get plastic surgery. If you see asymmetry in your reflection, Jason Robert was like, I have some objections as an ethicist, a Canadian with a beard just like that rapper, except I'm more Canadian. Francophone name plus a plaid shirt plus a sense of ethics. Jason, yeah, walk the walk. Do not mix that man up with Dr. Spot. Those two are binaries. Unlike zombies, they can be dead and at the same time not be. Zombies can't feel it when you hit them, they don't even hurt. So play whack-a-mole with their heads like Stephen Kirsch. Don't check the ethics, nah, just smash them and then call a zombie doctor like Jeff Gasson, or else get Michael Metzger to just try and track them like clams with contagious cancers, genetically engineered to be zombies, vegan zombies that are deep into astronomy and moral philosophy, eugenic progeny lovingly nurtured by Johnny Anomaly with cancer-free mommies. Just ask Amy Body, surprisingly few tumors in their elephantine bodies, dancing to the rhythm like Michael Jackson Thriller, and trained in the brain like Jessica Phillips Silver with the zombie dance lesson. Frozen with an uncannily zombie expression. Oh, thank goodness, now she got reconnected. Jessica, people used to accuse me of beat deafness until I trained in the hip-hop cultural basics, entrainment, lyrical zombification. I was depressed until my rhyme skills strengthened. Now they're mad formidable. Shout out to Ed Hagen. Shout out to Mzilikazi Koné and the Haitians. Freedom fighter liberation from not getting paychecks. Transatlantic slave ships, terrified racist, narrativizing othering zombifications, capitalism, failure of imagination. But as Daniel Nettle, attitudes are now changing. Pandemic, time for some universal basic income. Even libertarians can embrace it in our dystopian future of fembot masturbation. Eat, pray, run just might be our salvation. Bread with fermentation, transformation with Peter Reinhardt and Michael Calante, master bacon, which is a pun on masturbation. Starvation makes us psychopathic and cynical, a gaunt corpse-like cannibalistic wendigo, consuming young children as snacks by the thousand, like in medieval famine times. Ask Catherine Townsend. Hansel and Gretel, no safety net. Daniel Nettle, hold the cultural line, don't let the cannibals settle. Plus we should ask the ethicist Jason Robert that, why did he cure the possession with bear fat? Hunger, culture can help us in ignoring it. Learn your table manners with Barbara Natterson Horowitz, whether doing dishes or dancing up in Ibiza. Social justice for underprivileged hyenas. This ain't the Wild West. Now Wyatt Earp, so where's Brian Earp with some good Molly that I can slurp? MDMA, baby, yeah, I'm feeling that love again. It's a brave new drug. Ooh, it's positively Huxleyan. My famine PTSD is gone, it's not weird. Hallucinating imaginary correspondence like Bob Beard. A chemical transcendence of my limitations, signaling with a bugle like I'm Sky Riggs Davis with the go bag. The steak strips in the hammock and high marks with Cameron and Emily trying to examine it. That's not fair. What kind of apocalypse is this? If Sky gets to start it with that go bag privilege, parasite or symbiote, Dr. Zed or Rob Dunn. If you're born without one, get an isopod for a tongue. Correct the imbalance we inherited from childhood. Don't look to nature to be good though, that's wildhood. Evolution gave us nepotism as a function. From beetles to reptiles to Felicity Huffman. Network inheritance can get you out of a pickle. Just ask my mom. She's a frickin' government official. Yeah, but what if naturalizing privilege hurts the underserved? Barbara was like, in tennis, that's called an underhand serve. Cause culture can teach us not to make impulsive decisions only after we get rid of human exceptionalism. Okay, I hope that day will one day arrive before we have to escape on a ship with Diana 5. Please, culture, do what you can to evolve us before we fall prey to those uncanny vulvas. Can you tell? I'm feeling that dread on day 2, zombie apocalypse in my head. So bring in the undead, cause they're the life of the party. Pandemic privilege, yeah, flatten the hierarchy. Images of virtual reality sex. Attack of the zombie fembats up in my bed. Instant gratification coming from big tech. So if you can't beat them, then you better join them instead. Images of virtual reality sex. It's the attack of the zombie fembots up in my bed. Instant gratification. Big tech, if you can't beat them, then fuck it, just join them instead.
Amazing. Baba, that was phenomenal.
Yeah, that was, I mean, yeah, that was great. It was, we were talking sort of yesterday about the sort of themes that make a good sort of hip hop song. And I think today it was like, oh, wow. Today we hit, like, hearing them all like that. It's like, it's struggle and sex and what else do you need, and nepotism apparently. So
yeah, the interesting part is teasing apart some of the tensions and the themes between the different talks and like putting people in other people's talks and try to bring out like how there were some inherent conflicts and things. I don't know if the way that I describe it in the rap makes sense, but you can dramatize power struggles, intellectual power struggles, more just as much as literal political power struggles. And I feel like academia is all about that, and you can make Shakespearean drama out of the warring ideologies and worldviews that you find in academic research. So I have a lot of fun with that when I do wrap-ups, and whatever the conference is, I find out who subtly disagrees with who, and then I put them up like gladiators and lionize them doing that.
All right, well, speaking of that, what do you say we bring on our first guest? Author and sexpert Emily Witt. Emily, are you ready to join us here? We can have a little chat. Baba, so this is what Baba was doing, setting this up. So Emily, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't know if everybody caught it, but Baba was like, Emily, saying something. I think I kind of questioned evolutionary psychology, and he was like, don't you know what conference you're at? And Diana 5 didn't rebuke that or something like that. That was good.
Yeah.
little tension there. Yeah.
I mean, it was an amazing juxtaposition, because I don't think you were trying to pick a fight with a bunch of evolutionary psychologists.
No.
You just saw a comment that said, what about evolutionary psychology?
Well,
you don't think it comes to bear that much on the argument of your book. So you're like, well, I don't think we should really go down that trying to live in harmony with nature road. And then Athena was in the situation of having 4 of them about to come on and talk about human nature and how the architecture is built. It was beautiful.
I do think actually, though, this is the perfect conference for that debate, and I think, because I think the actual question that was brought up was like, should we base our relationships on what's natural, which we sort of talked about throughout the day, sort of the call to nature fallacy. And I think your response was like, not really, and I think that's a pretty valid point,
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, yeah, it was more like, I think in the kind of self-help realm, which is totally separate from the realm of expertise of these brilliant experts. Evolutionary psychology or evolutionary biology, these kind of pop theories have come to stand in for what was once maybe the Bible or some other archetypal ideal of how you're supposed to live in our plethora of choice and possibility. Some people are like, well, you should stop eating grain. And I don't know, so in that, I guess that's where I was at. Yeah.
It was like you were doing a critique of the sort of shallow, engaged pop version of evolutionary psychology that people take and say, now we know how to live our lives as if we're in the paleo zone.
Exactly.
But then, like some of the people that are speaking at this conference are 20 years into academic research careers that are all built on evolutionary psychology's precepts. Which that's what we should bring some of them in and see what they have to say, 'cause they're here.
I think there's actually a great chance to sort of talk about like, well, where is it that the insights from a sort of deeper evolutionary perspective on human nature can intersect. I mean, I brought up when we were talking with Diana that the evolutionary approach is not just about like, oh, humans are like this, right? But it's about, well, how did we also evolve to be flexible? How do we evolve to take into account our environment? How did we also evolve to be zombifiable? So Diana's done some, really awesome sort of, theoretical work to outline how behaviorism really intersects with the evolutionary approach and how we have, potentially really evolved not just to be able to be conditioned by others, but also potentially to condition others to serve our own ends. So, once you start getting into this space of like having a brain like we do that is as flexible and has the potential to be so responsive to our environments, both ecological and social, then, you're in a world where, yes, you need the evolutionary approach to kind of have a grip on human nature, but you also need to be deeply engaged about what's going on in society, what's happening with ecology, what people's fears and hopes and, what their developmental environments are. Like all of these things then shape, who we are. And I think probably especially our sexuality, right? Because that is, it's survival and reproduction from an evolutionary perspective. So our sexual psychology is probably going to be quite malleable depending on what cues we're getting from the environment.
It sounds like a lot of Emily's skepticism about it hinged on that trigger word "should." How much should it inform what we should do, as opposed to just being a description of the sort of path that led us to where we are now. And I think a lot of people will have different views on how much the should come into the conversation, if at all.
Yeah,
and Barbara's talk too, right?
Yeah, and well, I was just going to say, there's always a little bit of tension between futurism and agency and biological determinism and kind of, I like to be like really optimistic and against biology in a certain way, because there's also this school of thought about reproduction of women. It can get really essentialist, and there's something like kind of dismal about it.
Yeah, off your head, Athena, what percentage of evolutionary psychologists are women versus men? I think it is a majority.
I don't know, but I think at the conferences there are certainly at least as many women as men.
Yeah, I know within the psych department at ASU, it's the student body is 75% women. I don't know what the conference makeup is. That's for psychology in general, though.
Emily, I'm curious, what is like the dismal thing you think about, like thinking about ourselves biologically in terms of sex and reproduction? Is it that like idea that, as women, evolutionarily, we've had to take on the sort of larger burden of parental care just because we're gestating and lactating, or is it something else?
I guess, I remember reading that book, The Female Brain. I don't know if you know that book it's by a neuroscientist. I think her name is Luann Brinzepine, something like that. And I just remember reading it when I was young, like in my early 20s, and it laying out what you're supposed to feel at each phase of your life about children, what's going on at your brain in adolescence, and how you relate to other girls. And even if there was some truth to that, I don't know. I think there's something a little conformist about that. I don't know.
Almost prescriptive, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you feel, like, because my writing, a lot of it is about, okay, what happens if marriage doesn't work out for you? Even if you want it, even if you want to have kids and you want to get married, what happens if it doesn't get worked out? And so that kind of mantra of like, there's a biological destiny that when you fulfill it, you feel happiness and belonging. Like the anthropologist Helen Fisher is another person that's like a little bit conservative along these lines. You also have to live your life with the circumstances that you have. So.
My dad sort of is big into evolutionary psych, and so I was sort of raised.
Dave's dad
is
is Doug Kenrick, who's one of the founders of evolutionary psychology. Just so you know.
So I'm like in this sort of odd position of being sort of this like second generation, like those, and so
what you're actually describing is called network inheritance.
Right. Sure. It is. It's network, but it's also, most people I think have had this process. Like I think most people that study evolutionary psych have opted to study evolutionary psych and get really excited by it. Right. For me, I was sort of born into it. And I sometimes think, I've often thought that science, that religion is really bad at what science is really good at, but science is also a little bad at what religion is good at in terms of saying what you should do. And I do feel like I would describe it as, the metaphor I would use is, so I was tall, I'm still tall, but my whole life I would hear people say, you're tall, you should play basketball. You're tall, you should play basketball. You're tall, you should play basketball. And I feel like evolutionary psych, there is this pervasive idea of you're human, you should mate. You're human, you should mate. And it doesn't really take into the point, like, I hate playing basketball, And so I don't know. I think we know a lot of ways that if you want to sort of to pass on your genes, here's some really good strategies. If you want to help humans as a species pass on their genes, here's some really good strategies. But I do feel like, for me personally, I feel like I got a lot of pressure, to sort of play basketball.
I have to make a confession here. So I didn't grow up with an evolutionary psychologist for a parent, but I did. I was obsessed with evolutionary biology as a child. And then when I was 17, I discovered evolutionary psychology and just like read everything that I could possibly read. And so I kind of grew up, I think, like as a adolescent with the evolutionary perspective just on the way, everything I was experiencing. And honestly, like now that I'm in my late 30s, I kind of look back on sometimes I go back and read my journals because I've kept a journal since I was in my teens. And I'm like, oh, wow, I was like really cynical in this way that I think was informed by having read all of this evolutionary psychology at such a young age. But then actually going through life and seeing I think a lot of the very positive sides of human nature, like how people, spontaneously want to help each other and aren't always expecting to get something back. And, having lots of relationships with people that cause me to learn a lot that maybe you can't learn in a book. I've become much less cynical than I was when I was younger. And I'm pretty sure that cynicism was informed by my early sort of self-education in evolutionary psychology.
You started out with the selfish gene and then you evolved to the extended phenotype.
Yeah, I do love the extended phenotype. It is my favorite Dawkins book, but I do have this sort of love-hate relationship with Richard Dawkins, where it's like on one hand, I love the whole framework of the selfish gene, and on the other hand, I think there's a little bit of a sleight of hand there of like selfish genes equal selfish individuals. Not really, like that does not follow. You can have genes that are, being selected to propagate themselves that create organisms that are hella cooperative. So,
yeah, and I think that I do believe that it's a really excellent and accurate framework for describing human behavior. But I do think when it then gets into these questions of what we should do, how we should make the world better, which I think we really faced a lot of today, it gets tough, and it doesn't necessarily provide us the answers. We sort of have to come up with those on our own. So,
yeah. So, Emily, do you have any other thoughts for us?
I don't know. I'm thinking of that book, Sex at Dawn, and do you know that
bad
one?
Evolutionary psychology. That got ripped apart in all the journals.
That seemed like bad science. I'm not even, an academic, and I was like, this seems pretty sketchy.
I can tell you a funny anecdote that sort of distills the difference for me. I got to do a presentation at a Tennessee high school once that was very Christian and very conservative. I don't know why they let me in, but they had a relationship with the university, and I got to do my evolution raps. The teachers were seething. You could sort of tell by their crossed arms and angry faces. But after, I got to do a really fun Q&A with the students after spending an hour rapping about evolution for them. And one of the students said, so if evolution is all about reproduction, are you telling us that we should have sex or we shouldn't have sex? All the teachers be like, oh, this motherfucker from Canada better not blow it. And I was like, evolution doesn't tell you anything about what you should do, but it does predict that you're going to really want to have sex. So yeah, now you have that information and you can do what you want with it. So that's where I think it's helpful. It kind of like gives us a roadmap to understand the situations that are likely to trigger certain emotions. And then once you know that, you can actually, it's like the Why Buddhism is True book, right? It's like once you understand the source of your suffering, then you can transcend it to a certain degree, or at least make more informed decisions about whether to act on each emotion and impulse. That's where I see the benefit. It's just a guide.
Yeah,
I think it is. I do sometimes where when you look at things like, I don't know, like incel communities and things, like I think that it does play up this sort of idea in people's minds that if they're not having sex, if they're not having kids, they're failing at life, and I'm not sure that that's even what, evolutionary psych doesn't really say there's a way to win at life, right? There's really not an end game. It's just a sort of, it's more like, I don't know, Minecraft than chess, it's just things you can do. But I do think that's my concern, not necessarily with the science, but with how the science has been disseminated to people, especially once it starts getting sort of whispered down the lane. You get these ideas that I think Emily, you were sort of addressing some today, the sort of idea of, look, your relationship status affects your worth as a human. I think that's such a big challenge for people anyway. I think that that's one thing that really,
yeah, it's a fallacy, right, on all levels. So I think, yeah,
right, yeah.
So let's bring our next guest on, Mzilikazi Koné. Mzilikazi, thanks so much for being here with us on Late Night Brains.
Hello. I'm still thinking about Baba's rhyme. I'm still over here thinking about how
your name pronunciation in the flow.
It wasn't bad. It was close. It was close. It was enough where I recognized it and I was bopping to it. So I was like, yes. That was wonderful. Yes.
So, Mzilikazi, in your talk, you pointed out that there's zombies really everywhere. What are some of the unexpected places that we can find zombies today?
Well, I suppose it's the kind of thing that once you know what you're looking for, you can't help but to see. all around us. So I really was thinking through these places where people are pushed to the margins of our society, right? The margins, the periphery, those that are forced to go underground, live in the shadows and so forth. So we can think everything from workers who are not given their kind of due respect and centralization in our society, like farm workers, for example. Thinking through the fact that we still live in a system, a society that has slavery, right? Our global society has slavery. And in itself highlights that there's still the zombies around us. We can think about people who've been trafficked, right? And the intersections between those who are trafficked alongside the lines of immigration and immigration laws, and the ways in which laws and legality really do have an effect on making people be seen and treated as whole, or to be forced to be underground and try to kind of scrape by. Gig workers, domestic workers, right? These folks who are put out there to do the work, but very rarely have any benefits or security whatsoever, right? And yet are expected to not only survive on peanuts, but be happy about it too.
Right.
Yeah. Mzilikazi, one thing that you do work on that didn't really have a chance to talk about that much today is sex workers.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your work on sex workers?
Sure. So I write about sex workers and how they organize politically. So different organizations, for example, I spent a lot of time in Costa Rica doing field work with an organization called La Sala, the living room. And it's an organization of, adult women sex workers, right? So who are recognizing that the identity of sex worker in and of itself is already a politicized identity, right? And they are organizing as sex workers to affirm what they do as labor, as central to survival for them and their families, as within the labor market, and therefore should be respected as labor within the market, and something worthy of being protected, so that folks should have not only rights, but protections for the work that they do. Now, we have to understand the ways in which sex work, like any other participation in these capitalist markets, are based on the constraints that each of us live with, right? So sex worker as an identity may not be an identity that someone maintains their whole life. It's a kind of labor you might enter and exit. It might be very temporary. So that's to say that not every sex worker is organizing along the lines politically as I'm a sex worker and therefore I organize. But I'm curious about the ways in which workers, particularly folks who have been historically marginalized, organize, right? To say, we are human, we have rights, and we deserve to have our rights be respected.
Yeah. Emily, does the issue of sex work intersect with your interests kind of in the way that our attitudes and sort of the social embedding of our sexual relationships is changing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can tell a lot about a society by the way it treats its sex workers, I think. And a society that maligns them or that denies them dignity or tries to puts them at the margins and keeps them unsafe. It says a lot about its relationship to sexuality in general. One thing I think about a lot is, recently in the past few years, sex workers have been kind of at the vanguard of internet censorship. And there was some laws passed a couple years ago, the what's it called, SESTA laws, that held any website liable for any kind of sex trafficking that happened on it. So that meant that all of these Backpage, Craigslist Personals, all of these sites shut down, which pushed, people that do sex work that had thriving businesses on these platforms into the margins, where they were less safe, where they had to go back out on the street. And, all of these questions of personal freedom, where your freedom might fall afoul of a law, privacy, your right to privacy, all of this stuff, if you look at how sex workers are treated, it's kind of like a glimpse at the future of what our own like internet privacy and autonomy might hold, I think. So
Thanks,
Yeah.
Emily. We have a question here from
Great question.
Diana. Yeah. So, Mzilikazi, what do you think about sex worker automation? And Emily, feel free to jump in too if you guys want to take this together.
Sure. So I'm thinking that in terms of the creation of like robots, right? Like, well, I think about it in a similar way to I think about those turnstiles at the grocery store without workers, right? And the threat to real live human workers when you don't allow the space for sex work to thrive between consenting adults, right? So that's removing folks outside of the labor market, where that means less folks have access to participate in that work. I'm sure there must be some pros, but I'm a little wary of pulling more humans out of labor opportunities, right? We just have to, again, to highlight what Emily's talking about, really thinking through the ways in which so many political struggles have really taken place at the expense of sex workers, with the kind of attitude that somehow they're being saved by these laws, right? We're going to save you. We're going to make it really hard for you to work. We're going to make it unsafe for you to find clients and find out whether or not they're criminals or violent, right? So it ends up in a way of being kind of really paternalistic towards usually women and their choices and decisions. And I use choice within the, our understanding of choice and decision making within a capitalist market. Like, what are our choices to work? It makes life all the more difficult, right? So we continue to put workers between a rock and a hard place, right? Where we try to say we're gonna help you, but not really, right? We care about workers, but no stimulus,
Mm-hmm.
right? So which is it? Do we care for the workers, or do we not really care? So,
Emily, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I guess, to go back to the debate for people that weren't there this morning, we had this debate about whether, you could automate the person you love, whether you could fabricate that person or imagine that person enough to fabricate them. And Diana's comment this morning was that actually a lot of people would just want like a pliable domestic servant who, given the choice, wouldn't put up a fight or be complicated or ask for much. And yeah, it does seem like a lot of sex work has already been automated to a certain extent. But on the other hand, OnlyFans is thriving and cam workers are thriving. So there seems to be some desire on the part of people to have something that's human. Even if it's mediated, it's a human who might do something unexpected or, isn't algorithmic in nature. I missed Diana's comment. I didn't get to read it.
She said that she agrees there some dangerous jobs that should be automated, but she doesn't think that sex work qualifies. So,
Mzilikazi, do you have a sense from your research what percentage of sex workers are fully volitional in it? Like they chose it and they enjoy it and they uphold it, rather than there's some kind of disadvantaged zombification that's pushing them in due to societal constraints or...
Sure. Not really, but I think it's a really good question, and I find it to be a similar question I'd ask of any laborers, right? Like, what percentage of workers who work at the supermarkets are like happy with that labor? So I think we focus on sex work in particular because it is sex and it's sexy, right? And somehow therefore like different and should be more challenging in terms of labor and so forth. But I don't know of any kind of general like labor satisfaction surveys, although it would be just as relevant to ask about labor satisfaction for sex workers as any other laborers. But I just want to make that point that focus on sex work is like, gosh, we have a different kind of curiosity about sex workers because of the sex, right? Such that we don't ask the same question of like, teachers or salespeople or so forth of like, do you like that work or do you want to stay in that job? And a lot of folks, as we know, especially now, are getting by, are getting along. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I think actually now with the pandemic, we are starting to ask that a lot about teachers and things. I think it's starting to come to life that it's like, oh my gosh, we're asking people to now risk their life for not a lot of money and things like that. So why don't we let's bring Barb on.
Next we have our next guest, a physician, author, and evolutionary biologist, Barbara Natterson Horowitz. Barbara, welcome. It is great to have you here with us.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, and what a great conversation to be part of. I've been just typing comments, and so if you don't mind it, I will only show a few of them. I've actually just been adding a couple of slides because I want to respond to the conversation and not talk directly about what I was going to talk about, which is I think I was going to give my talk, what happens in the wild when she or he says no, which is part of a course section that I give on sexual consent and coercion across the animal kingdom. But actually what I think I'd like to do is just to respond to the fantastic open question here, which Emily, I think, posed, and I at least from what I understand, which is what can we learn actually, what truths and helpful generative truths can we actually learn about by turning to the natural world? And I think there are some that we have not really seen very often, largely, I think, because until the last couple of decades, most of the people who were turning to nature for information were males who were in a very privileged category, and you tend to see what you're looking for. So if I can just quickly share, Athena, do you mind if I do that really fast?
Okay.
Okay, so I was going to talk again about sexual coercion and consent, but instead what I want to do is just to address the question what I think we can learn, what we can learn about human sexuality by turning to the natural world. And the answer is a lot, but there are some opportunities, and then there are some pitfalls, some dangers, and we have to be extremely careful and mindful and thoughtful about the kind of science that we're doing, the methodologies that we're doing, and then taking the information and interpreting it as broadly as possible. So in my class, well, let me just take back about 15 years ago when I first started thinking about what turned into the book's Ubiquity. The sexuality was part of it, and I was first introduced to the extreme diversity of sexual activity in nature. I mean, I just did not know that until I started doing the research. Now, back then, it was a surprise to me that animals had orgasms. It was a surprise to me that I'd heard about quote unquote homosexual animals, which is a term that I don't use anymore, and I'll explain why in a second. And so the first book, there was a chapter called Orgasm, which really was a survey of comparative sexuality. But in the last 5 years or so, particularly in my classes, what has emerged is, number one, how disruptive it is for people to think about non-procreative sex in wild animals. So it seems like it's okay to think about non-procreative sex in our species, right? We have sex, for babies sometimes, but we also have sex for pleasure, and some people have sex for resources and money, and some people have sex for revenge, and blah, 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 blah. But in nature, animals have sex to have offspring. And it turns out that is absolutely not true. And an example of the kind of assumptions, unexamined assumptions, again, as a consequence of the blindfold of human exceptionalism, in my opinion, but these unexamined assumptions that have made us quite ignorant about what is actually going on in the natural world when it comes to sexual activity. And so I do agree with, Emily's, again, I'm categorizing what Emily's saying based on what I heard about it, but this kind of skepticism about kind of, what's out there and what can we learn? My feeling is what a lot of people have done is to look exclusively at one species or a few taxa, mostly primates, maybe mammals, but not very broadly, and certainly not looking for a range of sexual activity. So now in my classes, we we spend 2 full weeks looking at non-procreative sex, and we're looking at adaptive hypotheses. We take a Tinbergian approach to understanding why. So, for example, why do these African ground squirrels masturbate? And they masturbate typically post-coital. There are several different theories, and this study actually supported a sexually transmitted infection adaptive function. But there's many other forms of non-procreative sex. We do a whole series on bats, both megabats, subequatorial megabats, and then of course fruit bats. But it turns out, we see just all kinds of activity, and it's between males and females. Sometimes it's between females and females. Sometimes it's between males and males. The point is, it's not that there is, it's necessarily that the animals are homosexual, or that there's just this diversity of sexual activity that is, that we are just beginning to look at and try to understand. Now, there's a natural, I'm going to redact that term, there's a tendency among people when they talk about non-procreative sex in animals to assume that it's an error, that it's it's mistaken identity, that there's a problem with the individual. But I think there's a very real hypothesis that the pleasure associated with sexual function has been co-opted by numerous systems, some related to grooming, affinity building, some, with reproduction, and that it's an assumption that I don't think is supported, that necessarily sex was the first, was the reason that, or the sole reason that the pleasure emerged in association with it. That's a big part of what I think we can learn by turning to the natural world. I'll stop.
Thanks, Barbara. Emily, I want to give you the chance to chat with Barbara a little bit about this, because it seems like there's some really interesting connections between the work that you do and the work that she does.
Yeah, I'm completely ignorant in these matters, but it's cool to know, and I'm not surprised at all, the vast diversity of practices and instincts in the animal world, and that there's no, it's just so, in sexuality, it's always like bonobos or chimpanzees, and and it's just like we, I don't know, we have we live in a world that's really divorced from instinct in so many ways. So
yeah. By the way, I laugh because it's true. Like, bonobos get all of the attention when it comes to sort of diversity of sexual activity, and it's the bats are just so interesting because bats are so fascinating. But one of the reasons that I lead with bats is that we start the semester by doing a very in-depth look at comparative genitourinary function. And so we're looking at all the different kinds of penis morphology and clitoris morphologies. And what happens is, they start to look at a mammal's genitals, and it's very hard to not see the mammal/human mammal. And all of a sudden the biology gets sort of blurred, and it becomes absolutely the idea that it's surprising that there would be this range of activity gets flipped over, and all of a sudden there is an assumption of continuity, but it's just kind of this ignorance. And by the way, I think it's interesting that how we project on certain people that they're not sexual, or certain groups of people. It's interesting that I think there are certain groups of animals that also people are sort of surprised that they're engaging in different kinds of sexual behavior. So it's, human culture, perceptions of the natural world, all of that gets blended in together.
Which animals are seen as asexual?
Yeah.
Pandas.
Pandas, right.
Actually, pandas are a great example because, they're cute and cuddly, but pandas have this very narrow ovulatory window, right? So, it's kind of, and as do, by the way, these ring-tailed lemurs. So you have these kind of, when she's ovulating, it's this kind of October free for all in terms of, being the lucky sperm. But yeah, I mean, that would be good. The cute and cuddly animals. So again, it's this kind of, yes, there is anthropomorphism, and this would be an example of it, that, projecting some, highly culturally entrained human belief onto an animal for its cuddly looks. And on the one hand, but on the other hand, when you see an animal, for example, a big carnivore in the wild, having orgasm face and having a post-coital lethargy, it's like, that is not anthropomorphizing, and that is just comparative biology and comparative sexuality.
Well,
How do you tell which is which?
Sorry,
is there a yardstick?
Baba, we gotta get
all
you
this,
in. So
yeah, we need
we
some music with all this talk of animal sex.
Can I
so-
quickly ask Barbara, just because we're on the theme of overturning human exceptionalism, analogies for sex work in nature, nuptial gifts. There is, right?
There are,
provisioning trades.
There are, absolutely. I mean, that's seen in some primates, but actually, do you mind if I go back to my slide?
We got to go on now to Baba. I'm going to encourage everybody out there, send us your comments. We're inviting all of you to Apocalypse Improv with us here. Send us your choicest moments of the day, your hopes, your fears, and if you've got them, your jokes, and Baba is going to mix it all into an improvised freestyle apocalypse rap.
I have to rap and step on the scientific answer that I was craving. And
so maybe Barb, if you could write that in a comment so that Baba could rap it.
And we're gonna have you back tomorrow, Barbara, so we can talk more. So.
All right.
Okay. So we're good. We're going.
Yeah, you're on,
diving
Baba.
in? Okay. This is all right. Switch into rap mode. I was in geeking out mode there for a second. All right, check it out. I testify. I'm just a mammal that's living his best life. I mean, come on. Do I rap to get paid, or because when I was a teenager it helped me to get laid? I don't know. All I know is when I rap I never chill. I give girls a ride to the airport like Sarah Hill. I mean, on my lyrical flow, metaphorically. Yeah, I deny that tie-up categorically. Indeed, see, these are my raps. Athena, you are moving these comments by too fast. But check it out, this is how I spit it. I blaze the rhythm. It's a punishment for a poor cast of saviorism. Whatever that means, I couldn't read the whole paragraph. I'm just trying to kick rap so the people out there will laugh. Yes, indeed. This is how I do hip hop. This is one of those really dirty and dangerous jobs that I hope gets automated one day. That would be awesome. Yeah, because the robots could get it poppin'. Yeah, check it out. They would do the best raps. I hope a robot could even make this crowd laugh. That's right. That's how I spit it. The zombification. I always want to eat the bread from the zombie bakers. The grains and the yeast. Yeah, it ferments and then we bring out the beast. That's how I spit it. I got the lyrics in here. Yeah, bread is like solidified liquid beer. Yeah, that's right. That's how I do it kind of good in the hood. And humans always get hooked on the should. That's the naturalistic fallacy. You want to battle me? You want to see about avoidance of incest? You'll find that in hyenas, even up in a princess. See, yeah, I do it swiftly. See, Disney is hanging in with those princess symbolism that they try to sell to the kids. I'm surviving the apocalypse with these lyrics. Is how I spit. It's all just the improv, the rapidness. I'm trying to break out of my rigid habits. It's anti-rigidity. I'm spitting it so lyrically and people listen and they're like, oh my god, it's a silly beat. It's just getting entrained. I think it's just a myth about that female brain that Bryson Dine wrote about. I just blow it out. This is how I try to freestyle about what I know about, or any comments that you put in front of my face, and I just can freestyle about them up in this place. But I'm just trying to be aware of the time at this point as I continuously infinitely rhyme. So yeah, that's how I spit it. My rhymes are borrowed, so maybe we'll answer my question tomorrow. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much, Baba. So, Baba, you've got something else on for us tonight, don't you?
Yeah, in the last couple minutes. So yesterday we played the first half of Ballad of a Zombie, the new sort of zombie anthem song. And tonight, I guess we're going to play the second half, which nobody has seen yet. This is a kind of rap track where I use zombified parasites in nature to create an allegorical story about our human interactions with technology right now and the degree to which the memes they deliver us at high volume produce zombification through social media and through second lifestyle interactions that we're all addicted to. So
should we throw it on?
Well, so Baba, what happens in the first half of this, and so that we know where we're at in the storyline?
So, I mean, I'm name checking a lot of animals, and I'm turning the mirror on myself and confessing that my Twitter addiction is analogous to a green banded broodsack worm in a snail's eye stalk, because it's impossible not to look. And that's the adaptation that the broodsack worm has, is to attract the eyes of the bird, which is what we're all doing when we're tweeting and trying to get the most likes, is attracting the eyes. Then I talk about how I like to party like the cicadas. This is a cicada. Psilocybin dripping mass of spora, hyped up on amphetamines and psychedelics, and where did we get to? The next one's got myrmidid worms and crickets, and
Awesome. All right, well, let's hear it. Yeah,
here we go.
Hear it.
I'm part of a code. It's the ballad of a zombie. I don't know who's in control. It's not me, and it's got me in its search and pull. Feeling like a slave, a parasite. I'm feeling walking tonight. Though I don't feel quite right, zombie. Okay, parasitic relationships aren't all bad. I have kids to answer to, I'm the one they call dad. So I provide, taking out the garbage at night, fully aware that my relations are making me zombified. I love my wife, that's exactly how I get manipulated. Reciprocal altruism doesn't begin to explain it. Full cooperation, even unenvenomated. Domesticated cheater detection system disabled, like I get it. She's got all types of cares to avoid, like a Russian doll baby, hyperparasitoids, with fleas biting fleas and smaller fleas to bite him, and even me biting scientists ad infinitum. So what are we? Nothing but lambs to the slaughter, nothing but crickets led by myrmidid worms to the water. Nah, cause we can skeptically see when we're zombified, and sometimes wake up when things are out of line. So bring on the bite. It's the ballad of a zombie. I don't know who's in control, but it's not me. Ballad of a zombie. I feel an urgent pull and it's got me. Feeling like a zombie, like a slave to a parasite. Gotta get it off me. Brains got me acting wonky. Ballad of a zombie. This is the ballad of a zombie. I don't know who is in control, but it ain't me. Oh no, just like a slave to a parasite, I am feeling the urgent pull. The ballad of a zombie. Ballad of a zombie. Ballad of a zombie.
So just yesterday, I uploaded that to Spotify and Apple Music and all of that. So let's see how far the meme spores spread.
Awesome.
That's incredible.
Baba, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's just an amazing way of bringing together all these different forms of zombification. And thank you, Emily. Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, Mzilikazi, who is on her way to Brain Dead Theater, which is coming up next. And coming up later tonight, we will be streaming the 1978 George Romero classic Dawn of the Dead on Cast TV. You can check your email from Christina Baccio today. For login information for that, you can create a free account. Then just click on the link on your TV guide at 8:30 to join the fun. You can avoid the desktop app and smartphone app. Just use your browser, Erica tells us. So now just don't forget to keep your senses sharp and your wits sharper. If you want to survive the night, got to keep your head on your shoulders and don't leave your brains unattended.
It's crazy, but it seems so logical. I can't deny that there is something supernatural with you.